Welcome. This is the latest Sports Think Tank Live, and today we're joined by James Hope-Gill from Skateboard GB, I think it's now called, James, and Jonny from Sport 80. And we're just looking today at sort of digital and sport, and particularly, James, we've known you for a few years sort of personally, but also sort of professionally. And, it wasn't that long ago when we were talking about this new idea of the skateboard being in the Olympics in 2020 and, its growth potential. That was a few years ago. Where are we now? I mean, it's a really exciting year for you and everybody involved in skateboarding, isn't it?
Yeah, the last 18 months, to be fair, have been phenomenal and really, really exciting. And to sort of look back where we were 2 or 3 years ago, or even a year ago, and things have fundamentally changed. And so really exciting. So I think that the announcement that skateboarding was going to be in the Olympics was September 2016. And suddenly there was a little bit of a flurry of activity with the sort of UK sport. Suddenly we were on their radar and the BOA. And we'd already been talking with Sport England around, the potential of skateboarding, in a sense of, it's quite big participation, so about 750,000, a youth demographic, mainly male and white, so huge potential for growth in other communities. Yeah. And the fact that it's going to be in the Olympics as something that engages with youth is very visual, really exciting, and it's flexible. And the key thing there is that a lot of people want to take part in sport because it's structured, and you're competing against somebody and you're winning or you're losing. Whereas with skateboarding, that's just not the case. So looking back, skateboarding was really developed alongside as a marketing tool, because of the images that skateboarding creates. Brands got hold of that and started using skateboarding images to sell products. And the whole point of skateboarding has been to take part and to have fun and with other people and to get better yourself. It had the pure principle of skateboarding isn't to beat somebody, and because of that, and because it's wrapped up in culture and lifestyle and music and art, and fashion, it's sort of a different demographic, or a different type of person tends to do skateboarding than some of the structured sports, because they want flexibility. They want that ad hoc, informal environment where they can actually develop relationships and do something and get better at something without having to go, I've just beaten you, or or I'm better than you. So I think skateboarding just brings something different to a lot of other sports, which is really, really exciting. So to then see it in the Olympics, and going from we're a very young governing body, and so suddenly then having to start to engage with UK Sport and Sport England and the BOA and the International Federation, and start looking at, well, what does actually talent mean, and what does coaching mean, and looking at the real fundamentals of the basis of the sport or the activity, and the culture. So over the last couple of years, being able to start really thinking strategically and how we harness the power and the gift of skateboarding, and making that relevant to UK sport and Sport England and that formal sort of side of sport, has been an incredible journey. Yeah. But we've been very conscious that everything we do cannot compromise the integrity of the culture of skateboarding. Yeah. So what we're not prepared to do is just to do things and structure or act in a certain way that just ticks boxes, so we can either get funding or we can fit into a certain mold that might be expected of other sports. So that's a challenge, but it's a really exciting challenge. And so I could go on back and talk forever.
No, it's great, because we'll unpick some of that. Yeah. And particularly James, I mean, I think you're right. Is what your sport, so let's call it a sport, does is it picks on all the things that we know sort of work that need unpicking in a lot of the traditional sports. So the fact that you use those words fun and non-competitive and other pieces is a little bit of a challenge to traditional places, but also that concept of the whole thing around it as well. It's about a lifestyle as much as anything else. So Jonny and I have been chatting this week, sort of ahead of chatting to you, James, about particularly in a world in which they don't want to belong necessarily to, the freedom of skateboarding is part of the attraction. So belonging and membership, the traditional sort of way of running an NGB is difficult to do, but it's a great opportunity for you because you started from afresh, haven't you? Started with a blank piece of paper. And how do we create something that isn't exactly like a model?
Yeah, absolutely, a huge opportunity, and I think that there's two sides. There's the skateboarders and the skateboard community absolutely sort of wanting an organisation that is there looking out for skateboarding, looking out for skateboarders, making sure that decisions about skateboarding are made by skateboarders. To stop the Coca-Colas or the Nikes sort of dictating is the wrong word, but being in charge of the direction of how the sport develops and how it grows and what it looks like. So there's that whole, yes, the skateboarders want something, where they want more space, they want more opportunities, they want to be able to have good facilities. And then on the other side, you've got the very formal, well, actually, if you're a governing body, then there's a code of governance, there's membership, there's competitions, there's all these structures that most governing bodies have. How can we pull the two together to actually create something that's relevant to both sides? UK Sport and Sport England, we absolutely look like a governing body, and we're serious, and we have strategic plans, and we meet governance codes, and we're doing things absolutely right. But at the same time, that organisation has to look to the skateboarders and the skateboarding community as an organisation that's there to support them, empower them, facilitate, add value and lead. And so that has been, I guess, that's been my role to try and do that and pull that together and make sure that it works. And I think that we are moving in the right direction. Absolutely, we'll make mistakes on both sides, I guess. But we're there to learn, and I think that the way we've structured and set up is very agile, and it absolutely is there to add value. What right have we got as a governing body to come into this culture, this lifestyle, this sport that's been successful for 50, 60 years, with nearly 1 million participants, and say, we're the governing body, you now do what we say? We're not here to say this is what you do, when you do, how you do it. We're there to say, how can we add value to the community and the industry that's already there? How can we make it better? How can we better support giving the gift of skateboarding to the whole community?
Yeah, fantastically put. And Jonny, this offers both an opportunity, but also just not a threat, but a real challenge to the traditional model. As James has just sort of said, it is traditionally about bringing memberships together, but we're looking at something new here. So that piece is around gamification, around a digital offer. Slightly different to the traditional way that you'd approach this.
Yeah, and I think James will follow up on this. It's been an interesting but also quite exciting journey to go on with Skateboard and GB as they are now, insofar as it's really been a blank canvas, and where there are challenges that differ from a traditional national governing body that has foundations that have been in place for many years, and we have to kind of try to adapt our technology to suit their requirements, and many of them follow kind of very sort of similar pathways in terms of how things need to be configured. We've had a bit more of free reign, James, with regards to kind of how do we engage with the market, and Andy, we were chatting about this yesterday. What's been interesting is you've almost had this sort of risk-free approach to, okay, we want to try and engage with the market that everybody really wants to capture, the youth market. How do we engage with these people? How do we understand who they are? How do we know where they are? And then how do we have or gain some actionable data out of that? And that's been a really interesting part of the journey we've found. And what we'd really like to do is start to take some of those learnings on and pass those on to the other national governing bodies that we work with to start to say, okay, here's actually a real life case study of how we've gone about this, and how could we maybe start to replicate some of those processes, so that whether it's a British fencing, an archery GB, a table tennis England, how can we maybe reach out to some of those individuals that we know are out there, but they don't necessarily want to just come and join an annual membership scheme in the traditional way. So that's been really interesting for us.
Yeah, and I think that just to back that up, absolutely, the demographic and the type of person that generally is a skateboarder isn't the sort of person that wants to pay money every year to be a member of something. and that, we've known that from day one. And so, we've had to think long and hard around, well, the traditional ways that a governing body raises revenue are public funding, commercial, and membership. And actually that knocks out a huge amount for us from that traditional membership package point of view. We can't go down that route because that won't be successful. It doesn't give us credibility or affinity with the skateboarding community. So what can we do different? And the app and digital for us is the way we're going to engage. And the long-term solution or plan is that actually, as we engage and we get a critical mass, then we'll be able to start commercializing and generating revenue from that digital engagement, whether that's subscriptions through the app to get to different levels of access, or whether it's in-app purchases, or whether that's advertising or sponsorship, or there's a whole host of things that we're looking at. But for us, that has to be the model, not taking money off individuals. What right have I got to say to a 17-year-old skating down the street, "Oi, matey, give us a tenner and become a member"? It's just not going to happen. If they're part of the talent pathway, if they're part of the competition structure, then we've got a half argument there, absolutely. But we absolutely need to do something different, and that's why we see embedding digital in everything that we do and creating that digital community is really, really important.
Yeah, but I suppose in one sense, aren't you just facing what everyone else is going to face? But that's your core market, so. Yeah. Not yourselves, but the whole of industry is having to be ready to this tidal wave of change that is coming. Is that as we all get older and as digital immigrants rather than digital natives are just clinging on to some of the old ways, you've got a generation coming through. And probably even the time that we've been talking, James, we probably weren't talking about TikTok in 2016, and the pace. You mentioned agility. Is the stuff that I think you both said? Is there anything that you've learned, and what comes next really in terms of that agility and horizon?
Agility is really, really important. The thing that I'm just really conscious of all the time is that we're a very small team and capacity is really, really tight. And so suddenly something like Neil comes to me and goes, "Right, got to do TikTok." Go, "Right, okay, let's do TikTok. Who's going to do that?" And Neil's going, "Well, I'll do that." So you're going to go from 14 hours a day to 16 hours a day. And so without investment that can come really quickly, or without agility with investment that supports that agility, it's a real struggle, And so absolutely, we're geared up for TikTok and we've got plans for that. But to generate content, I need some cash. To actually have somebody with me that generates content across all the different platforms, which is how you engage correctly. And where does that cash come from? And actually, it can't be necessarily a 12-month or 18-month or a 2-year application process to try and get some investment in, because the needs now, we have to respond really quickly because the digital world is changing so quickly. And so for me, that's a struggle, and that's something that I'm grappling with. How do we respond and change quickly enough? We can, but we need investment and capacity to be able to respond, because I've not got 30 people sat in an IT department.
I'm sure. Yeah, and we appreciate that, James. I used to have to do sort of everything. But in terms of some of the wider sort of issues as well, I think we were chatting, and I don't think I'd realised just how many skate parks there are, but how few indoor ones. And I think there's some really innovative thinking about that sort of moving forward as well. We looked at the model around indoor climbing, and as you just sort of you've said, and we've chatted about, is that probably post Olympics and some of the profile of these sports has increased. Perhaps there's a new place that this will start to take place, and what other additional help we can all give around the country in different forms to help you achieve that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that. And this is my experience, and I might be wrong, and there's lots of people that are doing things differently, but you tend to have a facility and it's for that purpose, for a particular sport. And we've got that at the moment. We've got skate parks up and down the country. There's about 1,770 of which are indoor. The vast majority of the indoor ones are, it's skateboarding, BMX and scootering, because none of them individually will generate the revenue needed to run something. So we've already got the 3 sports within there, 2 of which are Olympic. But certainly the skate parks out there that are being successful, as they start incorporating, they've got big empty walls, start putting some climbing walls up there and generating revenue there. and opportunities for people to take part in climbing, but also you've then got things like parkour and breaking and some of the other sports that actually culturally fit quite well together in terms of the demographic and the type of person that wants to take part in those. So I certainly think that collaboration needs to take place, and that if you try and work in isolation, it's probably not going to work, or it will take a lot longer. Whereas actually thinking outside the box and pulling together organisations, sports people that think like you, absolutely works.
Yeah. And I suppose the challenge is, going back to that demographic, is that it's like us on Facebook, isn't it? Our kids aren't there because we're there, and that dynamic that you've got constantly of the freedom and expression of the skateboarding being a community without too much external interference, but also providing some, Jonny, the same place from the tech point of view, isn't it? It's got to be very intrusive. It's got to be a natural thing for the group. And for them to feel it's them that's organising this as well. So how do you manage those tensions between the pair of you, just sort of being involved, but as you said, James, right at the beginning, it's community led?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it's very much we see our role as, how do we add value? So what's there? How can we add value to it? How can we support, empower, facilitate? And if we're looking to support, empower, and facilitate, then actually it's about the end user. It's not about us. And so very much, our purpose as a governing body is around skate more and skate better. Skateboarders will either skate more or skate better. So everything we do needs to fit within those two phrases. If it doesn't, then it's probably not skater led, and it's not going to be embraced by the community. And we're not there in any, we are not perfect at all. We know where we want to be. We know what we want to be doing. But it absolutely has to be led. So we work a lot with working groups, and we do a lot around to what do skaters actually think, who are the influencers, who are the people that are experts in skateboarding that we can talk to, who've got experience, and just get a steer and make sure that we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I want to, as you know, one of the things I love is learning from failure. So I want to share any of the failures in the last, and how you responded to those, because I'm sure, as you just admitted, James, I mean, we are going to make mistakes along the way. And is there anything we can learn?
Communication's key. I think just in the this forefront of mind at the moment is the whole COVID thing, and skate parks having to close just after Christmas, and we got absolutely stung from a community point of view. There were, skate parks had to close, outdoor skate parks had to close, and we were told by DCMS that. We were under the impression then that was going to be communicated to local authorities. We went out with an announcement saying outdoor skate parks have got to close. Local authorities said, well, we've not been told that. We're only closing because Skateboard GB have told us to. And that's caused a huge issue, and that's been a real problem. And I think we did think, we communicated in good faith, and we'll feel let down, but actually, we should probably have done, even if we'd waited a day or so, or who knows? But that was I think the way we did it, the reaction wasn't good.
No. And Jonny, any sort of things you've learned through this sort of process of iteration and failure? I do think we need to embrace the word, but is there anything you've picked up along the way?
Yeah, I think a question I was going to ask to James actually was that, the process that we went through to build out the MySkate app was an interesting process. Obviously, when you're configuring a platform that's delivering membership services and all the coaching stuff and everything that James mentioned, a typical national governing body would be doing, it's a very kind of standard procedure that we go through in terms of kind of mapping out what that needs to look like. And James, you went through quite a detailed kind of market research piece before we even got to starting any sort of planning or build of the MySkate app. And do you think, I just wonder, in that process there, were there things that we maybe missed that could have helped during this COVID period, or have you had another platform that you could communicate through, having had the app in place at that point? Because there's things for us that, that was a first time for us building an app in the way that we have as MySkate. And it's one of those things that we want to try and take on board as we move forward and try and bring this as something that other NGBs can make use of.
Yeah, I mean, I think the functionality is there, So when we first looked for getting some investment in to build the app, I had some very clear ideas of what I thought would be in there, from my experience and what I thought people wanted. When obviously we got Neil on board and he started actually talking to skateboarders properly and engaging, and so what was built wasn't quite what I thought it might be. Broadly it's there, but not the detail and the pillars and what we're doing in there. But I think that what would we do differently? I think, to be fair, we are reasonably happy with it in terms of the functionality. There's lots of things we want to add in terms of developing that functionality, and I guess that will always happen. And as we add new functionality in, that will attract different people and make more people using it. But we're at 23, 24, 25,000 subscribers. We're getting 200,000 uses a month. So got to be reasonably happy with that because we launched it in COVID. Yeah. And actually it's been a period where people haven't been able to skate much. So, and I think the mix between information and so whether that's about skate parks, whether that's about shops or events and that whole information piece, as well as being able to use the app as a new skateboarder to learn tricks, or as an established skateboarder to learn tricks or do tricks and with your mates, is actually quite powerful. And I think that certainly we can pull more functionality in that will give it a wider use and enable us to engage. And when we start engaging and we're using the app, we want the app to be our engagement tool, so our main tool to engage with the community. But we're not using it as that yet. So yes, there's a game, yes, there's the skate park finder, and there's the information bit, but there's a whole nother piece in there around sort of proper engagement. But I think that we aren't ready for that yet because it goes back to that old, we haven't got the capacity to actually deal with and be able to respond properly. So we need to wait for that before we can take the next step, really.
Yeah, brilliant. James, just before we finish, I mean, clearly 2020 is a big year from an Olympic perspective, but also hopefully it's the springboard for you for participation sort of piece as well. And as a very small NGB, what are the biggest challenges? Where can we all help you sort of achieve this growth and stabilizing the sort of the body over the next sort of 12 to 18 months in particular, and obviously head of Paris 2024? I mean, I know you're on a cycle now, but there's an exciting opportunities ahead for all of us to get behind you and to engage with younger people in a different way.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think that the brutal reality is that probably it's quite good for us that the Olympics was postponed for a year, because actually it's given us, because we have got a little bit more capacity and wherewithal since this time last year, it's given us the opportunity to actually start preparing for that increase in profile and participation that we know is going to happen in September. And so, we're looking at what initiatives can we develop and create that will support the community. So whether that's skate parks or coaches or skate schools or kicks or other organizations, is there anything that we can do to actually support them to be able to manage that influx and that increase in participation? And that's what we're doing at the moment. So we're working on some of those initiatives. This time last year we just weren't there, nowhere near there, and that would have been criminal almost, not being able to prepare for something that, because you're only in the Olympics first once. And we won't necessarily get it right this time, but certainly we've got the plans and the investment now. So it's a sponsorship we've not announced yet, but we've got some sponsorship in to actually start developing those initiatives, and that's really exciting. So it's given us time to do that. Next 18 months, we're very much looking at how can we put in place the foundations for creating that program or system where a talented skateboarder that wants to become a competition skateboarder, how can we actually support them on an individual basis, not a sausage machine basis, on an individual basis to be the best that they can be. And there's a whole thing in there around workforce and different programs, I guess, but also the big thing for us is a facilities piece. So we really struggle for indoor facilities in the UK that are of a standard that we need. So our best skateboarders live in America. The reason they live in America is because they can skate every day on an international standard facility, and we haven't got an indoor or an outdoor facility in the UK, which is international standard. And until we get something that's indoor, we're going to struggle to populate that talent pipeline, and actually bring skaters through.
Brilliant. Okay, well, that gives us a good challenge to work on, James, and I'm sure lots of people who will be listening and following this, given the breadth, I think, of those who are involved in the sports think tank, not just digital, but actually that piece around active environments and building, and the friends over at SAPCA. Let's just make sure that we rise to that challenge. You've thrown it out there for us. I just wanted to thank both of you just for being with us today. I think it's a fascinating insight. I think that is a moment in time, isn't it, in which the Olympics is the focus, but what can come after that, and the base that you're building into something sort of bigger and better. And obviously the sort of the way that, Jonny, we've been working trying to sort of build that in community in a way that has some structure, but not too structured. I sort of feel your tension sort of on that every day, James, but I think you're doing an amazing job at clearly doing that. So let's celebrate that. Let's look forward. Who are the names we need to look out for as we go in the Olympics?
Sky Brown is number 3 in the world at the moment. She's 12. So we certainly we're hoping that she can do as well as she can. Then there's a couple of skaters that if we can go ahead with some of these Olympic qualifiers in the next 3 months, there's a couple more. So Alex Dacuna and Bombette Martin, really hoping that they can come through and get enough points to be able to get to the Olympics as well.
Brilliant. On that cheery note, a big thank you. Let's watch out for those names. Let's hope that this time next year, when we're doing a little bit of a revisit of this, James, that they're household names, because they've done the deal in Tokyo, and bringing back those medals, but also giving you the profile, hopefully, to grow an amazing sport. So thanks ever so much, James, for being with us, and Jonny. It's been really helpful, and we'll revisit this because this is a journey we're all on together, isn't it?
Certainly is.
That's brilliant. Thanks then both. See you soon.
Thanks, Andy.
Cheers, James.
Cheers, Jonny.